Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. A Calgary pastor learns his fate over charges stemming from his involvement at last year's Coutts border blockade. Plus, election mode is in full swing in Alberta with the two big parties making big promises. And will Trudeau get involved in the Alberta election? Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly says it could happen.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Talks resumed today between the Public Service Alliance of Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency as the union representing 35,000 CRA employees attempts to get a deal to end their 2-week-old strike. Canada's largest public sector union reached a tentative agreement for the 120,000 other federal workers, bringing an end to what was being called the largest strike in Canadian history. They reached a tentative 4-year contract agreement with the Treasury Board Sunday night that will give workers a 12.6% raise and a $2,500 one-time lump sum payment. But PSAC says it's entered into blitz negotiations for the 35,000 CRA workers that are still picketing. We now go to BCN's Angela Stewart outside of the Service Canada building in Lethbridge. Angela, what can you tell us about how these talks are going?
Yeah, Jeanette, what I can tell you is that bargaining with the CRA is ongoing. According to the Union of Taxation Employees, both parties met on Monday. Talks continued throughout the day, and talks also continued into Tuesday morning. But as of right now, there is no agreement in place. In a statement to Bridge City News, the UTE are thanking their fellow members who were out on the picket lines, reading in part, "We all deserve a fair contract. One day longer, one day stronger." Well, it isn't known right now how long bargaining between both parties will continue. Jeanette?
Thanks so much, Angela. Immigration Minister Sean Fraser and Families Minister Karina Gould discussed the impact the recent public service strike has had on their department's ability to process immigration applications and passports for Canadians. The strike for most public servants, including those in their two departments, ended after 12 days.
There isn't a significant backlog at this point in time because we did not receive many applications during the general strike. So we received only about 20% of the normal applications that we would receive. There are, of course, going to be some applications that are out of standard because of the strike. However, we do feel we have the resources to catch up with that relatively quickly. I do want to assure Canadians that if they do have urgent travel, that we'll apply the same strategies that we applied last summer to make sure that we're triaging people based on date of travel. And the other thing that I would say is Canadians do not need to go, early in the morning to get to a passport office because they will be triaged based on date of travel and making sure that we get people their passports on time. We are expecting a number of applications to come in over the next couple of days, people who didn't drop their passport applications off because of the general strike, and so we are prepared for that.
We expect, we can follow up with the exact number after, but it's about 100,000 cases that were not processed during the work stoppage that we otherwise expected would have been. We've got, thankfully, measures that we put in place initially to address the backlogs.
Some sad news. Canadian singer Gordon Lightfoot has died. A spokesperson at the Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto said the 84-year-old passed away at 7:30 p.m. last night and that his death comes less than a month after he canceled his 2023 U.S. and Canada concert scheduled on April 11th. That cancellation was due to health-related issues, according to a Facebook post. A Calgary street preacher has been found guilty on 3 charges related to his role in the protests at the Coutts border, which encouraged a blockade that lasted more than 2 weeks at the Canada-U.S. crossing. Arthur Pawlowski was charged for his remarks during a 20-minute sermon that he preached in Coutts, Alberta during protests against COVID-19 restrictions. For his part, Pawlowski says although he's been found guilty, that will not silence him.
I love this country. And I came to this country for freedom, and that freedom right now has been stolen from us. So I'm not worried, actually. I know that sooner or later justice shall prevail. I have been in a court of appeals multiple times. I'll do just that. I'll keep fighting. I guess in an interesting way, we are in a fight no matter what. I was hoping that this ordeal will be over and we can just move on. I mean, there is no pandemic, there is no restrictions, there are no longer mandates. Why can't we just move on with our lives? But obviously, this corrupted government doesn't want to move on.
Pulowski faces another charge under the Alberta Critical Infrastructure Defence Act, or willfully damaging or destroying essential infrastructure. However, the judge said he couldn't rule on that charge today because the defence has given no notice of a constitutional challenge. And speaking of incidents at the Coutts border, Canada Border Service Agency officers discovered and seized approximately 30 kilograms of suspected cocaine after examining a commercial truck at the Coutts border crossing last month. The driver was carrying a shipment destined for Calgary. During the search of the vehicle, officers also discovered 5.7 grams of suspected opium. The driver was arrested by the CBSA and transferred to the Alberta RCMP's custody along with the suspected narcotics. Alberta's provincial election is well underway, and United Conservative leader Danielle Smith is promising to create a new tax bracket for those earning less than $60,000 per year if her party wins the May 29th election. Her campaign pledge would cost an estimated $1 billion to the Treasury. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, this is great news for Alberta taxpayers because it would benefit people earning both over and under $60K, that $60K threshold. Chris Sims is the Alberta director of the CTF and breaks down exactly what this new tax bracket would look like.
See, right now, we only have one big honkin' tax bracket that reaches all the way up to $140,000 earnings per person, and that's taxed at 10% per year. What they're proposing to do is to create a lower income tax bracket here in Alberta so that anyone earning $60,000 or less would have an 8% income tax. So that's a big tax cut. For folks under that $60,000 threshold, the party says that this would equate to a 20% income tax cut. And keep in mind that because the first $60,000 of your earnings are now at a lower rate, okay, so they're now at 8% instead of 10%. That would help folks who are making more than $60,000 per year as well.
Sims says with the new tax bracket, people earning more than $60,000 per year would save more than $700 per person per year. If elected, Alberta's NDP leader Rachel Notley promises to hire more healthcare workers, fix primary care through coordinated teams of health professionals, and not roll back medically insured services. In total, Notley says 300,000 Albertans will be getting a doctor through 40 new healthcare clinics and 4,000 new primary healthcare professionals.
It will ensure that all Albertans have access to a family doctor. Not 2 weeks or months from when they need one, but in a matter of days. We'll make sure that these transformational changes and our work will begin right away. We will move to support flexible hours for family doctors and health professionals across the province. Extending hours to include evenings and weekends is something that health professionals have actually been asking us for years.
But with a North American shortage of healthcare workers, some may be wondering where will these professionals come from and what will entice them to come to Alberta. NDP candidate for West Lethbridge, Shannon Phillips, says our city has lost around 40 working doctors with 17 additional doctors to replace them under the UCP, ultimately putting Alberta into a massive healthcare crisis.
It's been a long time since I was in school, but 17 out of 40 is still a failing grade. They have dug a massive hole with their war on doctors and war on healthcare. And we cannot trust Danielle Smith and her misplaced priorities, which include making us pay for a family doctor, which include distractions and telling folks here in Lethbridge to drive up to Calgary to have their babies. We cannot trust the UCP to solve the problem that they created in the first place. We can only trust Rachel Notley for better healthcare and better leadership.
Phillips says more on their party's platform when it comes to healthcare will be released very soon. Well, it's no secret there's been conflict between UCP leader Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Some have been speculating that Trudeau's team could get involved in the Alberta provincial election to try to help defeat Smith and elect Rachel Notley and the NDP. We asked political reporter Brian Lilly if he sees this happening.
So don't expect direct involvement, but watch for where key players in Alberta federal Liberal politics are going. Especially in battleground Calgary, where the Liberals have they've got federally, they've got one seat. They'd like to have more. What are they doing? Who are they helping? Are they trying to? Are they sitting on their hands, or are they trying to get Rachel Notley and the NDP elected in Calgary? Because if the NDP take Calgary, we know they're going to take the province. If they don't, well, things are different.
In the full interview, Brian Lilly also discusses the Canada Revenue Agency wage demands and new changes announced with the federal rifle ban. You can catch it all coming up after business news. Well, the mayors of 4 Alberta cities who had their EMS dispatch taken away continue to plead with the province to return to their own local dispatch services. It's been just over 2 years since the province transitioned EMS dispatch away from Calgary, Lethbridge, Red Deer, and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo to centralized dispatch systems. The mayors collectively claim that the current centralized system has resulted in the degradation of services to Albertans. According to a written statement, Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgins says, quote, "Our focus has always been on, and continues to be on what is best for the health and safety of the people that live here. We fully support the perspective of our regional emergency services and other partners in the region that we are best served by EMS dispatch being managed at a local level. We are hopeful that in working alongside the province towards further improvements, that there's opportunity for our municipality to play a stronger leadership role in EMS dispatch." These 4 regions represent 43% of the province in the number of residents served, and the mayors are inviting people to share their personal stories about how this may have affected them. Monday kicked off Mental Health Week in Canada. This week is all about raising awareness and reducing the stigma surrounding mental health. Woods Homes in our city continues to provide services to youth that are struggling with mental health, and the organization says they're seeing a crisis with the situation, especially coming off of the pandemic.
Definitely an increase in mental health issues, and lots more families are just struggling, and Woods Homes is here for children, youth, and families on all aspects, so we're definitely seeing an increase. One of our main services in Lethbridge that we're known for is the CORE, which is the youth shelters, so youth ages 12 to 17 can access the emergency shelter and get crisis support. We have 8 beds, and they are youth that come in are given access to food and to counseling services.
On May 7th, to recognize the week, polices, including the Water Tower and City Hall, will light up green to show their support. Lethbridge is one step closer to being able to host a special event in our city's downtown. Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously on Tuesday to provide a letter of support for the conditional approval of $210,000 of cash and in-kind contributions to support the Play on Canada hockey event. This means $70,000 would be funded annually from 2024 through 2026 from the Major Community Event Grant budget. City staff told us the event does not require a bid. The funding will depend upon Play on Canada receiving its requested provincial or federal funding. Lethbridge City Council took a swing and made a direct hit with the announcement of new pickleball courts to be built. Council voted unanimously for 6 new courts to be added to our city. The new revisions would include plexi-pave coating and wind screens for the new courts. It will also remove the options of adding wind mitigation, alternative surfacing, and viewing areas and additional benches to the existing courts. Construction could begin by June, with August as the date for the new courts to be opened to pickleball enthusiasts. A University of Lethbridge student has started the Lethbridge Power Soccer program. It helps those with physical disabilities become more involved in the culture and recreation of soccer and sports. The program currently has 10 members in the group, with more interested. The Alberta Cerebral Palsy Sports Association has also given funding to cover the cost of gym rental and bumpers for the power chairs. BCN's Micah Quinn chatted with Chase Petruska about his research at the U of L and the touching reason why he wanted to start the program.
It's kind of like a form of escapism for them. For the 2 hours that we run the program, they're more than just an individual in a wheelchair. They're an athlete. They're playing a sport.
Chase Petruska told us when he came down to Lethbridge for his undergraduate degree in neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge, he noticed that there weren't any sports for those who have physical disabilities and are in wheelchairs or power chairs.
I just thought there'd be a good opportunity to start a power chair soccer program here, and then luckily I was able to go under Dr. Gerlinda Metz within her lab, and I was able to start doing research on individuals with physical disabilities, looking at their stress response, their mental health, how COVID affected them.
Petruska also coaches his brother, who has cerebral palsy, in the Calgary Power Hockey League, which helped spur him to pursue his research further.
They've not been dealt the best hands, and yet they still come out here, they still play these sports, and they still smile, they're still happy, and it really impacts me in a huge way that I use to motivate me within my research.
Petruska outlined what the results were for his honors and master's thesis.
For my results regarding my honors thesis, we found that individuals with physical disabilities were more susceptible to high-impact life stress situations, such as COVID. And then individuals with non-family caretakers, they recorded more depressive and anxiety symptoms and showed a decrease in activity, whereas individuals with family caretakers did not record those changes. Within my master's thesis, we're looking at the effect of metabolites in relation to individuals' brains and their physical disability, and then looking at if power chair soccer or power chair sports in general can build resilience and help decrease that susceptibility to high-impact stressful situations.
Petruska mentioned the project operates out of the North Gym in the University of Lethbridge, and it's free to drop in for a session. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A tour bus operator has pleaded guilty to 2 charges in a fatal rollover in Jasper National Park and has been ordered to pay $475,000 in fines. Crown Prosecutor Adam May, a specialized prosecutor with Alberta Justice, says the operator, Brewster, was convicted under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for failing to mandate seatbelts and for failing to control hazards. 3 people were killed and 14 others suffered life-threatening injuries when the all-terrain Ice Explorer lost control while carrying passengers on the road to the Athabasca Glacier on July 18th of 2020. Brewster was initially charged with 8 counts under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but May says the other charges were withdrawn as part of the plea agreement. Foreign Affairs Minister Melody Joly says she worries that the crisis in Sudan will spin out of control and lead to violence in Sudan's neighboring countries. She spoke today in Nairobi, Kenya, where she heard from people who escaped the violence in Sudan and met with leaders from across East Africa. Joly says Ottawa will do everything possible to help Sudan find peace. The country has been plunged into violence as 2 rival generals fight for power. Well, it was another lovely day in southern Alberta. The Lethbridge forecast showed a daytime high of 27 degrees, but was it a record breaker? Full weather details are coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Western Canada has had some beautiful weather, and it's all coming up for the rest of the week as well. Angela Stewart is in now with a full look at that forecast. Angela, the calendar says it's still spring, but it kind of looks like we've got an early summer on our hands, doesn't it?
Yes, Jeanette, absolutely. You are 100% correct. It definitely felt like an early summer today. And the good news is that those temperatures and conditions are expected to remain for the rest of the week, also heading into the weekend and into the work week. We reached a high of 27 degrees today, expected to be even warmer tomorrow, almost 30 degrees expected for tomorrow, so it's going to be beautiful. 27 for Thursday, 24 for Friday. As I mentioned, into the weekend, into the work week, still double-digit temperatures, but a little cooler with a mix of sun and and cloud. Our highest temperature was 16 degrees, so we beat that average high. Our average low is 2 degrees. The highest temperature was 28 degrees, recorded back in 1940. Minus 11 was the lowest temperature back in 1954. Our sun rose at 6:07 this morning and expected to set at 8:50 tonight. Now looking to temperatures across the country now for Wednesday. As I mentioned, it's going to be beautiful across the board all over the country, so it's great news all around. In Vancouver, 19 the expected high with a mix of sun and cloud. Near the water, 20 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Now looking at Calgary and Edmonton, expected to see those high to 20-digit temperatures in the high 20s, 29 for Edmonton, 27 there for Calgary. Now looking to our friends in Saskatchewan, nothing really to complain about. It's going to be beautiful all across the board. 25 in Saskatoon, 24 in Regina, and 22 with some light winds gusting to about 50 in the afternoon for Winnipeg. Now to our friends in the central part of the country, we're going to be seeing more milder, colder temperatures in these regions. Very minimal rain expected though, but still a lot cooler. 9 for both Ottawa and Montreal. And in Toronto, there 11 degrees with some rain. Now to Atlantic Canada, they're going to be seeing a little bit of snow, but still mild or colder temperatures. Fredericton, Halifax, and Charlottetown, 8, 6, and 4, with some fog patches in Fredericton and Halifax. St. John's, that's where they're going to be seeing that snow, like I mentioned. And that's your full weather forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
A new survey has found close to a third of Canadian small business owners raised prices by more than 10% last year. According to RBCX operated owner, a small business and legal management platform, the trend is continuing this year. It found more than 23% of small businesses have raised prices by more than 10%. Owner Chief Revenue Officer Derek Hopfner says the two biggest concerns for entrepreneurs right now are cash flow and inflation. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says other pressures are facing small business owners. They are including labor supply and cost, supply chain issues, and borrowing costs. Well, the U.S. Labor Department reported 9.6 million job vacancies for the month of March, its lowest level in close to 2 years. It's a sign that the American labor market is cooling off in the face of higher interest rates. Layoffs rose to the highest level since December of 2020. Prior to 2021, monthly job openings in the U.S. had never exceeded 10 million. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 207 points on the day to finish at 20,407. The Dow was down 367 points to 33,684. The S&P 500 was down 48 points to 4,119. The Nasdaq was down 132 points to finish at 12,080. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $4 to $71.66 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to $2.21 US. Gold was down 7 cents to $2.1661 US an ounce, and silver was even at $25.38 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.05 per bushel. Barley is at $8.93. Canola is at $15.96, and corn is at $10.06 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.98 to $162.90. Feeder cattle were down $3.75 to $205.95, and lean hogs were down $1.13 to $78.18. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $73.42 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Calgary street preacher Arthur Pawlowski has been found guilty on 3 charges related to his role in protests at the Coutts border crossing, which encouraged a blockade that lasted more than 2 weeks at the Canada-U.S. border. Arthur Pawlowski was charged for his remarks during a 20-minute sermon that he preached in Coutts, Alberta, during protests against COVID-19 restrictions. For his part, Pawlowski says although he's been found guilty, that will not silence him. Up next, we hear from Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly about the wage demands that are holding up the Canada Revenue Agency workers' strike, as well as new changes announced with the federal rifle ban. That's after the break. And if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Target Hunger is an annual food drive taking place Saturday, June 10th, and organizers are seeking volunteers to help drop off and collect the yellow bags throughout the city, along with sorting out food at the food banks on event day. The goal this year is to raise 50,000 pounds of food, and the more volunteers there are to help, the more food that can be gathered. To sign up, visit targethungerlethbridge.com or email targethunger.volunteer@gmail.com. The Family Center downtown Lethbridge is providing a weekly opportunity for dads, uncles, and grandfathers to play and connect with their children. Me and My Dad takes place on Saturdays from 10 to 11:30 a.m., featuring fun, brain-building activities for male caregivers to play along with their kids. This program is free and open to children under 12. For more information and to register, visit famcenter.ca. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
One of Canada's largest strikes is seemingly over, all except for those who give us our tax refunds. Plus, the federal government reached its 3-year anniversary of its assault rifle ban, but announced a new change. And finally, will the Prime Minister get involved in the Alberta provincial election? So many questions we want answered. Here to discuss it all is political correspondent Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun. Brian, welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so big news this week as everyone heard that a tentative deal was struck, meaning one of Canada's largest strikes in history has come to an end for most, but not for all, federal public service workers. The strike had shut down ports, government office buildings, and had threatened grain shipments and other key services. But Brian, wages seem to be the final sticking point. So how did things turn out? The union says that they got one increase, the government another. So what's the difference?
You know, I love that the union is going with compound wage increases, and the government's going with a standard increase. So the union says, oh, we got a 12.6% wage increase when you look at it compounded. And I say this because I regularly will report on a public service strike and what the union wants with what's the compound effect of their wage increase. So it's, for example, it's 4% this year. Well, 4% plus 4% plus, et cetera, you arrive at one number. If you just add up the annual increases, you arrive at another number. So now the union, which normally gets angry when I report on their compound demands, is saying, oh, we got 12.6%. Well, what they wanted was 14.5% not compounded, which probably means closer to 20% compounded. But now they're using the compounded way of adding it up because it makes it sound better. The government's saying that they agreed to an 11.5% wage increase over 4 years. Originally, it had been 9% over 3 years was their offer. So look, as I said to Hal last week, you can find some common ground and arrive at something. Turns out they arrived closer to what the Trudeau government was offering than what the union wanted. So it's 11.5% over 4 years. That's just shy of 3% a year. And it's higher in some years, lower in others. The last year of the contract, it's just a 2.2% wage increase, but some years it's over 4%. That's because of the way inflation has been wreaking havoc with all of our budgets. But yeah, I'm just smiling at the fact that the union is they're now on board with compound wage hikes because they weren't when I reported that they wanted really big ones in the past.
That's interesting. Now, I had heard that many of these workers actually only make between $40,000 and $60,000 a year. Had you heard otherwise?
It's between about $55,000 and $75,000 a year. So they are, when you look at what the average Canadian works, they're on the upper end of the average Canadian worker. Are they in the top 5%, the top 1%? Not these workers. Some of the executives within the federal government absolutely would be, but these are people who are making normal but decent, very decent wages when it comes to the jobs that they're doing. They also get good benefits, they get good pensions, and they're also going to get a $2,500 signing bonus. So, according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the strike cost the average striking worker in that wage band that I talked about $2,300. So yeah, they're going to be out $2,300, but in a couple of weeks, they're going to get a $2,500 signing bonus. And so the strike has effectively cost them nothing. It's going to cost the taxpayers a little bit more than that. So, the idea that it's 40 to 50,000, no, that's too low. It's probably in the $58,000 to $75,000 range.
Okay. Still, if you live in Toronto or places like that, Vancouver, not a lot. So it just depends.
Most of them are in Ottawa, and you do okay with when you've got regularly 2-income families in Ottawa. The average household income in Ottawa, where most public servants are, is well above the national average.
Mm-hmm. There were some rumors floating around that they were getting paid to be on strike. Was that not true?
It's tough to tell because there were competing messages from the government and the union. And so originally there was a story saying, look, these guys are going to be paid to be on strike, and they have to voluntarily ask for their strike time to be removed from their pay. The federal government came out with a statement saying that wasn't true, but then the union put out a statement saying, here's how you can make it true. Part of the confusion is that the federal pay system is still stuck in the 1980s. I remember, starting working as a student, and you'd work for a month before you'd get paid because your pay is always 2 weeks behind. And that's part of why they were still getting paid while they were on strike. They're not getting paid up to the day they've worked or up to the last week they worked. They're at least 2 weeks behind in their pay. So that's part of it. And, unless some of them are gaming the system, for the vast majority, no, they're not getting paid while they're on strike. And remember, there's still about 35,000 people who will remain out on strike. There were 155,000 out on strike, 120,000 have settled, but 35,000 have not.
Right, and you mentioned the 35,000. So those are the workers with the Canada Revenue Agency who remain out on strike. So we just passed that tax filing deadline, and lots of people need some advice here, Brian. They're saying, help, we want our refund. So any sign that this will end?
No, wages remain the sticking point there. Look, for all these workers, a big issue was they wanted the ability to work at home enshrined in the contract. And the federal government, the Trudeau government, didn't give them that. They're still willing to work on a hybrid model where 2 to 3 days a week you can work at home. And lots of employers are doing that now, but they didn't want it enshrined in the contract. The government didn't, the union did. And so that's unlikely to be something that the taxation workers get either. But their wage demands were much higher. If you put it on the compound, the way that the Public Service Alliance of Canada is doing, to make their win seem bigger, it's well over 30% that the taxation workers want over a 3-year basis. And that's simply unsustainable. That is not something that any government can agree to, because if the federal government agrees to this, okay, I know you guys are you're in the middle of an election in Alberta, but shortly there could be, whoever forms government will have to negotiate with public sector workers. And if you've got 30% over 3 years at the federal level, well, guess what? Your nurses, your teachers, your firefighters, your police, all of them are going to turn around and say, well, wait a minute, the federal guys got 35% over 3 years. We want the same. That's unsustainable. That's not something that taxpayers can afford. And so I can tell you that various levels of government all look to each other in acquiescing or refusing these wage demands because they know it all, one plays off against the other. And if Alberta or Ontario give huge wage increases, then the federal government has to. And if the federal government gives them, then the provinces have to. So they're all cognizant of that. And they're all trying to make sure that they're respectful of taxpayers' money. I know that's odd for me to say with this Trudeau Liberal government, but in this case, it's actually true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you mentioned it, the Alberta election. It's underway here. So there have been some flashpoints between the Alberta Premier and UCP leader Danielle Smith and the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So do you expect Trudeau or his team to get involved and try to help defeat Smith and elect Rachel Notley and the NDP? What do you think will happen there?
I don't expect Trudeau to get involved. Now, don't hold me on that. He may. but I don't expect him to get involved. But his team, I've already seen some top Liberals making comments about how Rachel Notley's great, how Rachel Notley should be reelected. And so I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there's some common ground there. Of course, there's no Liberal Party in Alberta. And so where do those Liberals go? Well, some join up with the UCP or previously had been members of the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta.
Yeah, there is a very small Liberal Party in Alberta.
Yeah, but it's not a factor. I mean, I remember covering the debates and feeling sad for the Liberal leader there. Like they don't win seats and they're not going anywhere. So what do federal Liberals do? They tend to go to one of the two parties that will win, depending on how they view things. And the current iteration of the federal Liberal Party under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is very much closer to the NDP than the old blue Liberal that if you were Jean Chrétien, you might have been aligned with. So I could see some top Liberals, especially from Alberta, looking to help Rachel Notley. I can also see some, a much smaller amount, either staying silent or quietly helping the UCP. So don't expect direct involvement, but watch for where key players in Alberta federal Liberal politics are going. Especially in battleground Calgary, where the Liberals have they've got federally, they've got one seat. They'd like to have more. What are they doing? Who are they helping? Are they trying to are they sitting on their hands, or are they trying to get Rachel Notley and the NDP elected in Calgary? Because if the NDP take Calgary, we know they're going to take the province. If they don't, well, things are different.
Mm-hmm. Interesting to see what will happen there. Switching gears here, Monday marked the 3-year anniversary of Trudeau's government's ban on what they called those military-grade assault weapons. So in those 3 years, the Trudeau government didn't pass any legislation, but they have faced court challenges and spent a lot of political capital. So on Monday, they announced more changes. So what happened here, Brian?
They're not going down the road. At least this is what they promised. And look, later today, they're going to come out with a new batch of amendments. But based on what they said on Monday, they're not going down the path that they were looking at last fall, where you had myself and all kinds of commentators saying initially, hey, you're going after hunting rifles. Oh, no, we're not going after hunting rifles. Well, here are all the rifles and shotguns that you're going after, and they're hunting guns. Oh, no, we're not. Don't believe that list. Like, you just look the other way. And then you had Carey Price, the Montreal Canadiens goalie, come out against it. You had the Assembly of First Nations. You had, hunting and fishing groups across the country say, wait a minute, you're going too far. All of these things added up to the government feeling they were under pressure. And so in early December, they pulled their amendments that targeted hunters and farmers and people in Indigenous groups who said, you're going far beyond what you promised. Yesterday, when they said they're not going down that path, they had the gun control groups going after them, Polly Souvian and other groups who are constantly calling for greater gun control. In fact, they'd like all guns banned if they could, and that's simply not happening. And so the government spent a lot of political capital over the last 6 months in ways that they didn't have to do, to arrive at a position that is untenable to both sides. They could have easily passed gun control legislation 2 years ago that would have taken care of what they wanted to do at their core when they made this announcement 3 years ago. They could have done this within that year, and they didn't do it. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals like to use gun control issues as a political wedge. They don't actually like to necessarily do anything on it, because if they do something, eventually it'll take it out of the headlines. It doesn't allow them to campaign on it. They like to campaign on it, and now they're stuck in a position where both sides are saying, we don't believe you. And so the gun control groups that they rely on for support, they don't believe them. And the hunters, the farmers, the Indigenous groups also don't believe them. They're in a horrible position on this file.
Finally, Brian, sad news. Canadian legend Gordon Lightfoot died on Monday at the age of 84. And many say that he was a Canadian treasure who sang about the country and its history. So, Brian, do you have any favorite songs by the Canadian band?
That would be a very difficult question. You know, I'm speaking to you, and you're in Lethbridge. You might think I'd say Alberta Bound, which is a song. You know, I know that.
Paul Brandt.
Paul Brandt has a song with the same name. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Paul. Forgot your last name briefly as I'm thinking about Gordon Lightfoot. They both have songs named Alberta Bound. Very different songs, but
Yes.
you know, Gordon Lightfoot's in the '60s was a brilliant song. Once upon a time, I might have said Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, but you know, this morning I got up and one of the first songs I put on was Early Morning Rain, where he's singing about flying back to Alberta. He's saying about Alberta a lot. He's an Ontario boy. He's from Orillia, north of Toronto, and he died at Sunnybrook Hospital here in Toronto. But he had a love of this country that spread straight, you know, from one end to the other. And you know, any of these songs, the Canadian Railroad Trilogy, all of them, just absolute treasures. I'm sad that I didn't get to meet him, didn't get to see him live in concert even. Many of my colleagues at the Toronto Sun not only got to see him in concert, got to know him personally because he was a very open man with the media and loved talking to people. And, you know, we're all the worse for not having him with us today.
Oh, absolutely. I have chills. Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, food allergies and other issues seem to be on the rise these days, so we're going to find out how to cook some healthy foods for people with food allergies and all kinds of issues. I'm here with Ellen Saby of High Q Foods. We're actually inside the Purple Carrot. Alan, thanks so much for letting us come in and invade your space today.
No problem.
Love it. You're going to teach us how to cook. First of all, tell me about High Q Foods. How did this get started? What's your backstory?
Sure. Well, I was type 2 diabetic, 250 pounds. I'd come from a kickboxing background. So I was, you know, cutting weight, putting on weight, cutting weight, coaching guys. And when I stopped doing that, I just kept putting on weight. And turns out I was insulin resistant. That's in my genes. I was my whole life. Couldn't really understand what was wrong. Got tested for type 2 diabetes, and I said, what's type 2 diabetes? And the doctor said, it's high blood sugar. And I was like, well, let's just call it high blood sugar then. That's, you know. So then I didn't do anything about it for 9 years, because I'm a guy. And then it got really, really bad. And I won't tell you that whole story, but once it got really bad, I decided I better do something about it. And the doctor wanted to put me on medication. I said, just give me 3 months. And in 3 months with food alone, I completely reversed it and have been on this path of shouting from the top of my lungs ever since.
Okay, and it's just all about the food.
All about the food.
Okay, so this kind of, you were like, wow, light bulb going off in your head. Other people need to know about this.
Yeah. And being from like a fitness background, right? And having people cut weight and teach them how to do it. For me and my body type, it was completely wrong. And to be able to learn how food is just that medicine, and what, you know, and all the issues that we face with our food manufacturing and what was in the stores, to eliminate all that and live like I have now for 5 years with completely controllable blood sugars, down a bunch of weight, loving life, running in the coolies, and cooking my ass off.
Okay, were you always a cook though, or is this?
I've always loved to cook. I've always been the guy that goes to everybody else's house and cooks, but I have worked in a few commercial kitchens. I quit what I was doing, started working in some commercial kitchens, and just expanded into doing it myself, and just it's always been a passion.
So this isn't a restaurant per se, but it's
not.
more like people order food from you and you deliver?
Correct. There's two ways they can get food from me. You can order it online, or you can just show up in the coolers or the freezers and get food here.
Interesting. Okay, so these are, what are these exactly?
These are steaks. These are 10 ounce, 9 and 10 ounce.
That.
Yeah, I know, it looks like it. So those have come out of the sous vide machine. They've been in there for an hour and a half, and they're perfect medium rare right now. So we're just gonna get these pans smoking hot.
And what kind of steak is it?
It's a top sirloin.
Sirloin, okay.
So this is the kind of steak that you would normally get in a steak sandwich. Go to a restaurant, order a steak sandwich, that's what you get, right? But they're good steaks because they're really low fat. They're really super lean, and once you do it like this, you'll think you're cutting into a prime rib. But when you get a pan that bounces, see how the water bounces around like that?
I do.
Well, that means it's not going to stick. I could do an egg in there and flip it no problem now. So a little bit of oil. Don't put water in the pan after you put oil. You'll have a fire on your hands. And now, because these steaks are literally already cooked, what we're going to do is we're just going to reverse sear them. It's my favorite sound in the world.
The sizzling steak. Okay, so you mentioned, well, first of all, I have my apron on now, so I can help you do some chopping of some onions and whatnot. Want me to stir these up? Okay. I did wash my hands as well.
That's good.
Okay, so Alan, you mentioned you have clients.
I do.
Do you have other programs?
Yeah.
What kind of programs do you have here? So if somebody can come and almost like a
Sure.
consultation?
Right now, we're in week 2 of an online program. There's 10 different ladies that are doing I call it a wellness fat adaptation program, and basically teach them how to be low carb. Everybody's body needs to learn how to burn fat better, right? We've never done it because we eat so many carbohydrates.
Right.
But the way we evolved was to absolutely burn fat for fuel. Our body can only store a couple thousand calories of sugar, but if you would have seen me, obviously a ton of fat, right? Why? And the reason is, it's because that's energy. But as long as we're eating carbohydrates, we can never access that energy. So as I teach people to, great job. As I teach people to, look at that nice sear. As I teach people how their bodies can be fat adapted, and that's cutting out carbs, but it's not for life, right? It's only a 6-week program, and then I teach people how to sustain that. And once people can sustain that, then you definitely can introduce, high fiber and good carbs and yams and all kinds of beans and lentils and all kinds of things. But once we're fat adapted, it's shown that as long as we go back there a couple times a week, we can sustain that forever, because we want to effectively burn fat for fuel. And we especially want to be able to have those ketones present when we need them, right? So it's always amazing, because after 4 weeks, people are like, that's weird. We restrict the feeding window to 6 hours a day, and they're not hungry. Why is that? Because we have calories. We have all the fuel we need.
Exactly.
Like, go to the fridge. Go get something, body. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the premise of it.
So would you say that no two people are the same in terms of how they store their fat, how they metabolize everything? Yeah.
Well, there's such a thing as bioindividuality, right? Like everybody's got 2 arms, 2 legs, 5 fingers, but everybody's got dysbiosis is a little bit different. Like women especially, I mean, they just get the short end of the stick. You guys are way more antibiotics as a rule than men, and that destroys your gut biome. So I make sauerkraut here, fresh sauerkraut. That's in the shelves. The bone broth has got very, very good stuff for your guts as well. But if you're high blood sugar versus high cholesterol, or maybe you're underactive thyroid, overactive thyroid, there's all little nuances there to what we can do. So it's not all exact. There's not a cookie cutter, but like 80% of it's the same.
So is this basically the keto diet?
Well, it is getting you to burn fat, right? So it definitely is, but the keto diet can mean anything to anybody, right? I mean, you could just eat salami and be in ketosis. So the fact that you have ketones present means that you're in ketosis, and that's where the word keto diet comes from. But how you go about that in a healthy manner versus dirty keto and everything else, I don't like to use the word too much, but I do measure ketones. The nice lady that was just here, her ketones are up high. She just finished a workout, super happy, losing a lot of weight.
Okay.
Fat burns differently than sugar, definitely, in our energy pathways. And for 1 molecule of fat, we can get 54 units of energy.
Right.
Sugar is only 38.
Okay.
And less oxidative stress, and all kinds of advantages, which is why our body stores it, and it doesn't store sugar. So it is getting you into ketosis, and then we want that fat adaptation to stay there with you with the rest of your life, right?
There's so much science behind this.
Oh, lots of science, yeah. But basically, like the old school diet was eat less and do more. And we still have to be in a caloric deficit, but if we're in a caloric deficit ending sugar, then we've lowered the energy going into our machine, right?
Okay. This looks like a fairly simple meal that anybody can really cook. It's nothing really outside of the norm. I mean, we're talking steak and onions and veggies. So you're basically just cutting out the fats, you're cutting out the carbs, right?
Well, the fats are, the fats come from, I use the healthy oil in, extra virgin olive oil on the roasted veg. We definitely used, you could use ghee as well, but I used an regular olive oil to saute the onions. Yeah. And then a quick sear on the steak, right?
You mentioned bone broth. Do you cook a lot with broth?
I do, and that's how I started. I started taking broth because I found out how good it was for us. And what bone broth is it's grass-fed, grass-finished beef bones or pasture-raised chicken, and you cook that down with basically some veg, for 16 hours. And that extracts and leaches a lot of healthy minerals out of the bones, out of the marrow. I mean, it's something that we survived on. 200 years ago, you'd be eating broth right now, right? That's what you would have, and so I use it in all my soups.
And we'd all be real skinny.
And you'd all be real skinny,
Right.
exactly. And there's a lot of advantages to bone broth because it's really high in collagen, which is in your intestines, something called hydrophilic, so it protects your intestinal wall, and gelatin. Gelatin, collagen. Gelatin is hydrophilic, sorry. Collagen, hair, skin, nails.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So it's really good for us, along with all the nutrients and protein that's in it. And if you do it right, it's super tasty. But that's all I use for soups and everything here is my own broth.
Right. So a meal like this, or most of the meals that you make, what's the average type? Is this pretty much your average meal, or do you?
No, this is special because it's Steak Tuesday, and you came,
okay,
right?
okay.
So I
what
had
do
to
you
do something
usually
special.
make?
Well, online you'll see, and out in the coolers every day, you'll see a Caesar salad where I make my own dressing here from scratch. And again, I'm a huge believer with my cooking classes and teaching people if you can just make it yourself from scratch, you're you're not using inflammatory oils, you're controlling the ingredients, you're going to be way better off.
How do you know if it's an inflammatory oil versus
Well,
not?
yeah, that's a great question. If you can squeeze it, if you can cold press it and oil comes out, it's a good oil. If not, like seed oil, you can go to the store and say vegetable oil, and there's pictures of broccoli and carrot on it. But you can't get oil out of broccoli and carrots. But Food Canada and the States, they allow you to say vegetable oil when it's a seed oil, and that's a 15-step process with chemicals, and they got to put deodorants in there because it's rancid, and then it's very high in what's called omega-6 to omega-3. It's not good oil, right? And
So if you
studies
can
have shown
squeeze
that
it,
if you can squeeze it,
you can eat it, basically.
So that's basically avocado oil and extra virgin olive oil. Coconut oil is cold pressed as well, which I use a lot.
Okay. So this is really good for, you were mentioning people with gluten problems.
That's correct, yeah.
Diabetes.
That's correct.
What if you have, say, IBS?
Yeah, IBS, there's a lot of studies that show that, like sugar and of course gluten, it feeds bacteria in their gut that aren't probiotics, but they can still populate. They can still get nasty, right?
Yeah.
So IBS is also been shown to really help improve with sauerkraut. We want to balance that gut biome, right? And if with sauerkraut, we're trying to build up the good biome and starve the bad bacteria, right? And that good biome, that good gut biome, those good probiotics, in order for biotic to turn pro, I always say, it has to be able to generate hormones, it has to be able to regulate your autoimmune system, has to do all these things. And the sugar and people with SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, they don't have, it's a huge dysbiosis, it's a huge imbalance. So eating like this is really, really important, along with a good probiotic schedule and prebiotic schedule.
Okay, so you're going to show me something. Maybe chopping an onion.
That's right. We're going to get you to chop an onion. I do cooking classes, and my huge belief is not only do we talk nutrition for 3 hours and maybe have a little wine, nothing wrong with that.
Oh, that's fine.
Wine's okay, red wine's okay, people.
Of course.
But what I want, because I'm a firm believer in if you just make a change to making everything yourself, that's a huge jump, because then you're controlling the ingredients. So I teach people how to hold a knife, and how to chop onions, how to chop a bell pepper. So I'm going to chop an onion. I'm going to show you how to chop an onion, and we're going to get you to chop an onion.
Okay, we'll see if I can live up to the standard here.
So we got a root and we got a stem. So we cut the stem off, right? And then I leave the root on and I cut it in half. Okay, now you might want to just pause while I just take this off, take the skin off. Now the reason I leave the root on is twofold. One, it holds it together, right? And two, a lot of that stuff that makes you cry, when the root is cut, that's what releases.
I was just going to ask you, Alan, do you have a special trick for not crying?
It's to leave the root on.
So leave just one root on.
And then when you hold your knife, get a good shot of that. We want to hold it with those 3 fingers, not on top, but we want to pinch it like a golf club, but we want to pinch it. So if I take those fingers off, I'm holding the knife. It's like choking up on a bat. I've got a good solid control of that knife now, right? And then we don't want to cut all the way through. We just want to use our fingers as a guide. Cut it and then strokes this way. Flip it down. You have an onion you're making.
Very
If you can cut an onion that fast without chopping a finger off, you're going to be like, who cares?
Okay.
So now we want to cut. We don't want to cut all the way down to the root. We just want to.
You know
cut.
what? I'm actually left-handed.
Okay, go.
So does this mess everything up?
No, it doesn't. No,
Like that,
see, you
right?
grabbed that perfectly right off the bat. So now you want to, you want to cut along the lines of the onion.
Okay, but
you
not
don't
all the
wanna-
way.
But you don't want to cut all the way through.
Right.
So you want to use your fingers as a guide.
Like here?
Look at me. You put it like this and you rock it forward so that your knife never goes
Oh, past my finger?
past your finger. So you want to grab it like this. Yeah.
Look at this. We were chopping 101 and now
And then same thing, like get your little perfect little fingernails out of the way. So you want to hold it, like this, right there, and then rock it forward. And then the blade comes up, put the blade against my fingers, and go down. There you go. And then I move this back and it does it again. There you go. So that way you don't cut off those nails or your fingers.
Oh no.
See, already, that's
the nails are not
really
coming
fast.
off, believe me.
And when it comes too thin, you just rock that root down so it's got a good flat surface. Yeah. And then that goes in the composter.
Probably not as perfect.
No, but it's really good.
Okay, so Alan, we're talking a lot about this. So what is somebody's first step on their food healing journey, so to speak?
Well, I think two of the greatest things that you can do is cut out sugar and increase your probiotics, right? Really learn what an inflammatory oil is. Stay away from seed oils. Really improve that. Cook from scratch as much as you can. That's more than one thing. But number one, I tell everybody, if you have any kind of a weight issue or allergy issues, let's cut out sugar. Number one.
Oh, it's so hard to do that, though.
I know. And I always say hunger is one thing, but craving's another. We really shouldn't crave anything, right? Being hungry is normal. Who cares? Craving something? Something's wrong.
Well, Alan, thank you so much. Before I grab another great big piece of steak here, I just want to say thank you so much for having us down here, teaching me how to cook these delicious, nutritious meals. Hopefully, I know I've learned something, definitely. Hopefully our viewers have as well. This is Alan Saby of High Q Foods. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Come and see us. Kitchen is inside the Purple Carrot. Most people don't know. Thanks for coming down.